In this segment, we're primarily going to talk about the rubber boot and my solutions for that, and we'll get to that in just a minute. Just a quick little review of where we're at with restoring the body of the ignition lock. You can see it's done, pretty much. I've got a new piece of sleeving here installed. I've got the wire, I think I talked about this before, resoldered here. I do not have the connector block installed yet. I'll get around to that eventually, but primary thing I did is let this clear coat dry, because I had clear coated this, of course, actually it's probably close to a week ago now, and I wanted that to dry thoroughly before I started manhandling it with the solution to the rubber boot. And then I, of course, put the sleeve on and then carefully recrimped, I think you can see right there, recrimped the clamp around the sleeving. This is 9mm inside diameter sleeving, by the way, if anybody's wondering, and that is, I think, about what the original was. So let's move on and talk about the rubber boot. Now the rubber boot, which I'll show you here in just a second, slides over the pigtail and then fits up over the body of the ignition lock, and then it basically is a cover that protects the wiring here and is intended to keep most water, moisture, and dirt away from the contacts. This is the boot. And as you can see, I've got it taped up a little bit. And the reason I did that is I wanted to provide some support as I go ahead and work on this. This was ripped right here in the bottom. I don't know how well you're going to see that, but there's a rip across the bottom starting right in this corner and working across and then up this side. So really it was opened up like that. And the previous owner, just to reiterate, I think it was the previous owner anyway, glued this with contact adhesive to the body of the ignition lock and then used a zip tie to pull this round section right here, this protrusion, this nipple, to pull this close, because that's split as well right here. I've considered a lot of different options. I put a lot of thought into this, actually. My first thinking was to see if I could find another one on eBay as part of another lock. This is not sold as a separate part, so in order to get it, to get one, I would have to buy a whole nother lock. And everything I found, the few I found, and there were a couple out there, were in worse condition than what mine was. There had pieces missing, and some of the locks for sale or ignition switches didn't even have the boot anymore. So then I determined, well, I'm going to have to come up with my own replacement or repair for this. And I considered a boot made for another application, like for a tractor shifter lever. They make all different sizes. You can get those both OEM and aftermarket in all different diameters and lengths, and I looked at those and nothing really quite appealed to me. I could probably have made something work. Then I thought, well, what about using a piece of nitrile glove? Now this happens to be black, which is what I wanted. Most of my work gloves in my shop are blue, but I thought if I could get a large enough pair of black nitrile, I can maybe cut out the thumb and then cut a hole in it and then slide it up over here, and then to stretch the black nitrile piece of thumb around this section. So I went out and bought the largest pair, or I actually bought a box of them, of black nitrile I could find. These are extra large. I don't remember the thickness of them. They're about as thick as you can get, and it's very strong, very stretchy, and it almost worked. Not quite. If I had one to two sizes larger, it probably would have worked. The problem is that it was a little bit too small, even when I warmed it up and heated it gently to allow it to, to stretch and fit over this body here. It wouldn't quite make it, and what would happen is it would split. So I tried 4 or 5 times with 4 or 5 different thumbs cut out of gloves. Didn't work. So then I was kind of back to square one. I thought, well, now I'm going to have to come up with another solution. And then my thinking moved to, well, just repairing what I have. And I actually started there first originally anyway, trying to figure out a way to repair this. And I moved on to the other solutions, potential solutions I just talked about, and I went full circle back to repair. That is why I have this all taped up, just to get it back in shape and to get the original conformity back together. Then I played around with the idea of using a piece of the nitrile glove right here as a patch. This is just a piece that I was experimenting with, and this glove you can see I've cut all apart. So I was thinking through, could I use a piece of this and use contact cement? And I know that's black on black, so you probably won't see it very well, as a means of creating a patch with contact, again, contact cement. The reason I didn't pursue this solution is though it's strong, it's very flimsy and it's quite thin. And I was concerned that it was going to allow that joint where the damage is, where it's ripped or torn, to flex too much like this. I also considered using a piece of inner tube. This is just a piece of old inner tube I have around. This is much, much thicker than this material that the boot was originally made of, and I thought, though it probably would work, it's too thick. And I could still use contact cement, but this is actually the opposite of the glove. This is a little bit too flimsy and too thin, even though it's strong. And this is a little bit too thick and too heavy. So then my thinking drifted to what's next. And then it occurred to me that the best solution might be black, high-quality duct tape, because it has a very aggressive adhesive on one side. It's very tough. Thickness is between the inner tube and the black glove. It's quite a bit thinner than the inner tube, and probably 3 or 4 times thicker than the black nitrile glove. So I thought, that might just work. And it's got an adhesive, so if I was able to cut and make a pattern for the inside here and apply a piece of the duct tape to the bottom, and then probably a strip along the edge here where it's also ripped or damaged, that might just work. And this is, again, a Gorilla brand. I've talked about this in previous videos. Very tough, very aggressive adhesive. You kind of get one chance with it, a bit like a contact cement, because it really, really is aggressive, the adhesive. So what I did is I took a piece of fairly heavy paper, I scrounged up, and I made, as you can see here, and I made a pattern that will allow me, I'm just dropping the pattern into place so you can see how it would fit. Something like that. That would cover the entire bottom of the inside bottom of the boot. I will leave the blue tape on the outside for now to hold the shape, to allow me to get that black duct tape down in there carefully. And then I'll just make a strip or cut a strip for this inside lip right here that's also torn. And whether I'll go all the way around or not, I don't know yet. I haven't gotten that far. Then I don't have to, worry about the hole for the pigtail because it's still there. In terms of the rip here, because this protrusion, this stem here, as you can see, is also ripped, I got some thoughts on how I'm going to fix that, but that'll be the next phase after I get this put back together using duct tape. So what I'm going to do, get this out of here, I'm going to take this white paper pattern and I'm going to lay it on the duct tape, something like that, then just trace around it and take an X-Acto knife, leave the tape right on the roll, but use an X-Acto knife to cut around it, and then peel it off and then attach it to the inside here. So that's my plan going forward. And again, we'll come back and talk about what I'm going to do here at another segment. So that's my thinking right now. I'm not going to show all of that because, number one, I've got to get in fairly close to my head and probably would screw up the camera shot. But I will definitely bring you along as I can to show you how it's going and how it turns out. And again, we'll talk about what I'm going to do to fix this a little bit later. So that's the current status of the repair for the rubber boot. And here we have the finished ignition switch lock with the repaired boot reinstalled. I think you can see now why I had to install the connector block in the end here and the wiring connector block that ties into the main harness, because this harness has to be fished through this outlet right here, and it wouldn't go through, of course, with that block on there. So that was added last. Here you can see, I think, the repair. Again, on the inside of this section is a piece of that duct tape that I cut and using that pattern and attached. It was split right here. This is this little protrusion right here my thumb is pointing to is where the ground strap is, or earth strap is, soldered to the body of the unit. And as you can see, it's got a little bit of a bump to it, and that's what puts a strain on that grommet, and it split it there. So even though I did repair it on the inside with a strip of duct tape, I also thought I would just run this strip all the way around, like you can see here, to hold it together. And I think it looks okay. Right here where this was split, what I did, actually it split right here, I just took a piece of heat shrink tubing, 1/2 inch inside diameter, and before I put the block on, electrical connector, I slid that 1/2 inch heat shrink tubing up over here, over this section right here, and then just applied a little heat gently, didn't want to overdo it, to shrink that down over that split piece right there to hold that together, as you can see, and that worked out really well. Probably could have done the same thing here if I had a piece of heat shrink tubing that was big enough. I don't. This is, gee, I think that's around 2 inches in diameter-ish, 50 millimeter, something like that. And you can get heat shrink tubing that large. I just don't have it, and I would have had to make a special trip for it. So that would have worked as well as the black duct tape. So pretty well finished. Got the escutcheon of the trim piece reinstalled, as you can see here, in the key. So this is now all ready to install. So let me reposition the camera, and I just want to make a few parting comments before we wrap this video. I want to finish this video by just making a comment on the repair for this rubber boot on this Suzuki TS50 ignition switch lock. There's probably people out there, I'm thinking, that might be wondering to themselves, why in the world would he put all that effort into, you know, trying to repair this boot when in fact it's really not seen, it's up behind the frame. In fact, just leave it off and get on with it. If you're asking yourself that question, and I would think that some of my long-term viewers have been with me a while, know what I'm going to say next. If you're asking yourself that question, then you really don't understand why I do what I do. For me, the finished product, that is the finished restored motorcycle in this case, is actually anticlimactic for me. When I'm all done with it, it's pretty, it's nice, it's as perfect as I can make it, but it's not a bike that I will ride intentionally outside of making sure it works. It's a trailer queen, and it will be just a complete full restoration. And the reason I do this kind of thing on my projects is because I'm enjoying the journey, not the destination. The finished project is not the destination for me, because this bike will not be ridden by me to speak of. So when it's done, and I move on to something else. But rather the journey of thinking through solutions to problems I've never encountered before, such as this one, or coming up with methods, procedures that I've never had to use before, devise on the fly, such as this repair here, is really where I get my enjoyment. In other words, I enjoy the journey. I really am not focused on the destination. So that's why I did this, why I put so much effort into it. And again, I understand some folks might not understand it or appreciate it, but that's why I did it, and I wanted to explain that a little bit for folks so that people aren't scratching their heads out there thinking guy's crazy for putting so much time and effort into it. You still might think that, even with these statements, but nonetheless, I want to share that with you before I go ahead and install this on the bike, which will be coming up here fairly soon. That's going to be it for this video today, folks. Any issues, questions, thoughts, drop me a note. Otherwise, as usual, thanks for watching.